Hi every wise reader. Welcome to the next video from Read Wiser, a YouTube channel dedicated to helping you improve yourself through books. Join us as we explore the profound insights of Sapiens, a brief history of humankind by the renowned Yuval Noah Harari. Imagine going back 70,000 years. You'd find our ancestors, Homo sapiens, as just one of several human species, confined to a corner of Africa, with no more impact on the planet than gorillas or jellyfish. Fast forward to today, and we've walked on the moon, split the atom, and fundamentally altered the globe. How did this insignificant ape become the master of planet Earth and, as Harari puts it, the terror of the ecosystem? Sapiens argues that our superpower wasn't sharp claws or brute strength, but something far more unique. Our ability to create and believe in collective fictions, stories about gods, nations, money, and laws. This incredible journey, full of surprising twists and controversial ideas, is what we'll unpack today. Harari structures his epic narrative around three major revolutions that propelled Homo sapiens from obscurity to planetary dominance. First came the cognitive revolution, starting around 70,000 years ago. This wasn't about bigger brains necessarily, but a change in how our brains were wired, leading to a new kind of language. This language wasn't just for warnings or gossip. It allowed us to talk about things that don't physically exist: myths, gods, shared beliefs. This ability to weave imagined realities enabled unprecedented cooperation among strangers, setting us apart from all other animals and even other human species. Next, the agricultural revolution, beginning about 12,000 years ago, saw us shift from hunting and gathering to farming. While it allowed our population to explode, Harari provocatively calls it history's biggest fraud, arguing it often led to harder, less healthy lives for the average person. Finally, the scientific revolution, kicking off just 500 years ago, was ignited by an admission of ignorance and a thirst for new knowledge and power, leading to the modern world of incredible technology, global empires, and capitalist economies. We'll explore each of these revolutions, examining how they built upon each other and shaped the sapiens we are today, starting with the spark that ignited it all. So what exactly happened during that cognitive revolution 70,000 years ago? Harari argues it was the moment history declared independence from biology. Before this, human behavior changed primarily through slow genetic evolution, much like other animals. But a chance genetic mutation, the tree of knowledge mutation, seemingly rewired the sapiens' brain, unlocking a revolutionary linguistic ability. This wasn't just about making more sounds. It was about the kind of things we could communicate. Sure, other animals can warn, careful. A lion! But only sapiens could say, the lion is the guardian spirit of our tribe. This ability to discuss fictions, things that exist only in our collective imagination, is Harari's key point. Why is this so powerful? Because it allows for large-scale, flexible cooperation far beyond the limits seen elsewhere in nature. Ants cooperate in millions, but rigidly. Chimps cooperate flexibly, but only in small groups of known individuals. Sapiens, however, could unite thousands, even millions, around shared myths, belief in a tribal spirit, a nation, fairy cooperation like Peugeot, which Harari uses as a prime example of a legal fiction, or human rights. These imagined realities or intersubjective realities aren't lies. They are things we collectively agree exist, and as long as we believe, they exert real force in the world. This ability to create and revise these shared stories allowed sapiens to adapt their social structures rapidly. Bypassing the slow lane of genetic evolution, we could form larger bands, develop complex trade networks, trusting strangers based on shared fictions like gods or money, and coordinate sophisticated hunting or warfare strategies. This cognitive edge, Harari suggests, is why sapiens ultimately outcompeted and likely drove to extinction other human species like the Neanderthals, who, despite comparable brains and strength, likely couldn't cooperate on the same massive, flexible scale. In essence, The cognitive revolution gave Sapiens the software update needed to take over the world. Built not on stronger bodies, but on shared stories. But how did the invention of farming change the game? Let's explore that in the next section. Around 12,000 years ago, Sapiens began to manipulate the lives of a few plant and animal species, dedicating immense effort to sowing, watering, weeding, and herding. This was the agricultural revolution. The conventional story praises this as a great leap forward, enabling settled life, surplus food, and civilization. Harari turns this narrative on its head, controversially labeling it history's biggest fraud. His main argument is that while agriculture allowed for a massive increase in the total human population, it resulted in a significant decrease in the quality of life for the average individual compared to their hunter-gatherer ancestors. How so? Firstly, farmers worked much harder than foragers, spending long days on back-breaking tasks like clearing fields, plowing, and carrying water. Studies of ancient skeletons reveal a rise in ailments like slip discs and arthritis after the transition to agriculture. Secondly, the agricultural diet was far less varied and nutritious. Foragers ate dozens of different foodstuffs, protecting them from malnutrition and the failure of any single food source. Peasants, however, often relied heavily on a single staple crop like wheat or rice, leading to nutritional deficiencies and making them extremely vulnerable to famine if that crop failed. Thirdly, permanent settlements became breeding grounds for infectious diseases. Coupled with poorer nutrition, this led to soaring child mortality rates, even though overall population grew because birth rates increased. So why did we fall into this luxury trap? Harari suggests it was a gradual process, a series of seemingly small decisions aimed at achieving a little more security, our children will never go hungry, that cumulatively led to a harder life. Each generation simply continued what the previous one did, unable to foresee the long-term consequences like population booms that ate up surpluses, increased disease and greater dependence. By the time the downsides were clear, population growth had burned humanity's boats. There was no going back to foraging without mass starvation. Agriculture, particularly grains like wheat, didn't serve humanity. Humanity became enslaved to serve the evolutionary success of wheat, which spread across the globe. The food surpluses didn't lead to leisure, but fueled population growth and supported small elites, kings, priests, soldiers, while the vast majority remained hard-working peasants. This revolution also extended to animals, whose domestication, while an evolutionary success for species like cattle and chickens in terms of numbers, often involved brutal practices and immense individual suffering. So, agriculture provided the foundation for large societies and empires, but at a significant cost to individual well-being and animal welfare. How did these larger societies actually organize themselves and begin to merge? That's the story of unification, which we'll cover next. The agricultural revolution allowed populations to swell, but feeding thousands or millions in one place doesn't guarantee cooperation. Humans lacked the biological instincts for mass collaboration. How then did we organize ourselves into cities, kingdoms, and eventually a global network? Harari argues this unification was driven by the evolution of powerful imagined orders, shared myths and fictions, operating on a potentially universal scale. He focuses on three key unifiers: money, empires, and universal religions. First, money. Barter systems are inefficient for complex economies. Money emerged as a system based on two principles: universal convertibility, allowing anything to be exchanged for almost anything else, and universal trust, enabling strangers to cooperate economically. Whether cowrie shells, gold coins, or digital data, money works because everyone believes it has value. It became the first system to bridge cultural divides and create a single global economic sphere. Second, empires. Defined as political orders ruling diverse peoples with flexible borders, empires like the Persian, Roman, Arab, and Chinese gradually assimilated smaller groups, spreading common languages, laws, and cultures across vast territories. While often founded on violence and exploitation, empires acted as massive melting pots, reducing human diversity but increasing large-scale political and cultural cohesion. They justified their rule by claiming to bring benefits like peace, justice, and superior culture to their subjects, the white man's burden being a later iteration. Third, universal religions. Moving beyond the local spirits of animism or the partial gods of polytheism, universal religions like Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam appeared in the first millennium BC. They posited a superhuman order and laws valid for everyone, everywhere. Their missionary nature aimed to bring all of humanity under a single umbrella of truth, further eroding local traditions and fostering a sense of shared identity among vast populations, even across different empires. These three forces, economic, money, political, empire, and ideological, religion, worked often together to gradually weave disparate human groups into larger and larger networks. Though the process involved conflict and coercion, the long-term historical trend, Harari asserts, points undeniably towards global unification, creating the interconnected world we inhabit today. This unification laid the groundwork for the most dramatic transformation yet. How did the fusion of these forces with a new way of thinking launch the scientific revolution? Let's examine that pivotal shift. The last 500 years have seen an unprecedented explosion in human power, transforming our world beyond recognition. Harari identifies the engine of this change as the scientific revolution, which he argues was fundamentally a revolution of ignorance. Unlike previous knowledge traditions, like religions or philosophies, which assumed that all important truths were already known, revealed by gods or ancient sages, modern science began with a radical admission: ignoramus, we do not know. This willingness to admit ignorance about the most important questions became the driving force behind seeking new knowledge. This quest wasn't based on scripture or tradition, but on empirical observation and mathematics. Scientists gathered data through experiments and observations, then used mathematical tools to formulate comprehensive theories like Newton's laws of motion. Crucially, science wasn't content with just theories. It aimed to use this knowledge to acquire new powers, to develop new technologies. This created a powerful feedback loop. Scientific research yielded new technologies, power, which enabled states and industries to acquire more resources, e.g., through conquest or economic growth. These resources were then reinvested into more scientific research. This loop tightly intertwined science with the other two great forces of modernity: European imperialism and capitalism. Imperial expeditions like Captain Cook's voyage, which included scientists like Joseph Banks, were both military, political, and scientific endeavors. They sought new territories and resources and new knowledge, admitting geographical ignorance by drawing maps with empty spaces. The knowledge gained then facilitated further conquest and exploitation. Capitalism fueled this engine by providing credit based on trust in future growth, which increasingly relied on scientific and technological breakthroughs to make that growth happen. Science promised new discoveries that could lead to new industries, more profits, and thus justify further investment. This potent combination has granted humankind seemingly limitless energy and resources, tackled age-old problems like famine and disease, dramatically increasing life expectancy, and shrunk the globe. But it has also led to ecological devastation and unprecedented animal suffering in industrial agriculture. Most profoundly, science is now challenging the very foundations of life. The Gilgamesh Project, the quest to overcome old age and death, is underway. Furthermore, through biological engineering like gene editing, cyborg engineering, merging organic and inorganic parts, and the potential creation of inorganic life, AI, Sapiens is beginning to replace natural selection with intelligent design. We are on the verge of upgrading ourselves into something fundamentally different, perhaps godlike beings, raising profound ethical questions about the future and the very meaning of being human. This brings Harari's sweeping history to a thought-provoking and potentially unsettling present. So Sapiens traces our astonishing journey from an insignificant African ape to the verge of godhood. Harari's central argument hinges on the power of collective fiction, our unique ability, born from the cognitive revolution, to create and believe in shared stories like nations, money, and human rights enabled large-scale cooperation and propelled us to dominate the planet. The agricultural revolution, despite its common portrayal as progress, is presented as a trap that increased our numbers but often diminished individual quality of life, binding us to labor and hierarchy. The subsequent unification of humankind was driven by the universalizing imagined orders of money, empires, and religions, weaving humanity into a single global web. Finally, the scientific revolution, rooted in the admission of ignorance and allied with capitalism and imperialism, granted us unprecedented power over both the external world and our internal biology. Harari forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Has this immense increase in power truly made us happier? He surveys psychological and biological perspectives, suggesting happiness might depend more on biochemistry and expectations than external circumstances. Our historical trajectory, while granting immense collective power, may not correlate with increased individual well-being. As we stand poised to use intelligent design to overcome death and reshape humanity itself, Harari leaves us with a critical warning. We have advanced from canoes to galleys to steamships to space shuttles, but nobody knows where we're going. We are more powerful than ever before, but have little idea what to do with all that power. Is there anything more dangerous than dissatisfied and irresponsible gods who don't know what they want? Sapiens offers a truly mind-bending perspective on who we are and how we got here. What part of Harari's argument surprised or challenged you the most? Do you agree that the agricultural revolution was history's biggest fraud, or that our ability to believe in fiction is our greatest strength and potential weakness? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this summary insightful, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to ReadWiser for more book summaries that help you improve yourself, and share it with anyone curious about the grand sweep of human history. Thanks for watching,